because this is coming from the designer Cole Worley, who's designed a ton of really excellent games, 2 of them being in the top 100, which is really incredible for a single designer to have multiple games in the top 100. And of course, the most notable of his games are those 2, but he also designed games like Oath, John Company, and Vast Crystal Caverns. And I've actually already owned a few of his games, and they're all really excellent games, but I personally did have some pretty big gripes with them that caused me to get rid of them from my collection. So why would I be excited about this game? And the reason for that is because I always tend to have the same issue with his games, and that's just that there's too much of a rules overhead, and the games often require multiple plays with the same people for players to actually play the game properly without breaking it in some way or making bad decisions that kind of imbalance the game. But once you get to that point, these games are really excellent and offer a lot of depth and strategy. So if you do have a regular play group, these games might be a really great option for you. For myself, I just tend to prefer games that are a little bit more accessible and easier to get to the table. And that's why I'm so interested in this game, because Cole Worley is an excellent designer. I just don't feel like he's created a game yet that fits into my own preferences when it comes to board games and the amount of overhead that go along with them. But I did a lot of research on this game. I read through all the designer diaries, and the type of game that he's designing this time around is aimed to be quite a lot simpler than the other games that he's designed. Not so simple that he's going completely off the other side, but he's trying to design a game that's about as complicated as the base set of rules for Root if you were to disregard all the additional rules that go with the asymmetrical factions. And he actually goes into a ton of detail explaining the different design challenges that he ran into and the different solutions that he came up with and the reasons for that, which is one of the reasons that this is my pick of the week. Because after reading all that, it got me really hyped, not because he was just talking up the game, but because he was getting really technical and explaining the reasoning behind it and justifying the reasons that I should be excited for this game. And if you're just like me and really wanted to like those other games like Vast, Root, and Oath, but found that they just had a little bit too much overhead, I went through all the designer diaries and gathered up all the different ways that this game is simplified, and I think you'll be interested to hear all the different changes that Cole is making with this one, or the values that he held as he was designing it. But before I get into that, I guess I should let you know a little bit of the theme on this one. And in this game, each player is going to be playing as their own small faction in a spacefaring universe, where players are going to be traveling through the galaxy, growing their faction, and transforming and making different moral decisions that can have ripple effects through the entire galaxy. The game does have a narrative, but it doesn't always punish failures because it can put you up into impossible situations where doing well doesn't necessarily mean winning, but losing spectacularly can have you careening into a new opportunity. And yes, this game does have a branching narrative to it where the player's decisions will affect the way that the game unfolds because this is a campaign game. And I know already a lot of you might think, wow, this is just another massive game because most campaign games are ridiculously large, but this one is actually just a 1 to 3 game campaign, so you're going to be completing the entire arc in just 1 to 3 games. So even if you don't have a super consistent play group, it's not a huge ask to get them together just 1 to 3 times to play the entire campaign. And that's one of the first things that really impressed me with the simplified design, and that's something I'd love to see from more games because it's not always easy to get people together consecutively to play a massive game like Gloomhaven. But instead offering short campaigns that can be repeatedly played and have completely different outcomes and stories, that really seems like something I'd love more designers to explore. In going through the designer diaries, Cole really does a great job of summarizing the sort of mindset he put himself in while he was designing this one, and that was to create a game that immersed the players and didn't break that immersion by requiring them to constantly have to reach to the rulebook to try and understand the different nuances or complicated rules that a lot of other games, even those that he designed, do suffer from. So instead, this game's going to start with a base set of rules with some randomization at the start of the game, but then it's going to spoon feed you more and more rules as the game goes on so that players don't have to feel overwhelmed trying to learn everything at once. And the same concept is applied to the different factions as well. Instead of all the factions being vastly different like in Root or Vast, all the factions are going to start very similar to each other, and then you're going to be modifying them yourself as the game goes on, learning the new rules and abilities in bite-sized chunks, but then also choosing your own path because you're not restricted to a subset of abilities limited to your faction. Instead, players will discover and add different abilities that they think will help them, and then include those into their faction's toolset. Players will be gaining opportunities to gain new abilities throughout the game, but these are going to be fairly rare, but also at the end of each chapter, players can also spend any points that they gain obtained in order to upgrade or advance their faction in different ways. And another really interesting aspect of this game is as you end a chapter and start a new one, the time between those chapters represents a large passage of time within the world of the game. And players are going to be drawing a fate card for each of the chapters, and depending on the player's decisions within that chapter, it's going to determine which branch or path that fate card is going to resolve to. And this can alter the rules, the narrative, as well as the state of the game as it moves forward. But now that you know a bit about the tempo of the game and the way it was designed, how do the actual mechanisms work in the game, and what is that core mechanism? And the core mechanism in this game did take me off guard because it was not what I was expecting at all, because the core mechanism in this game is trick-taking. And I wasn't sure exactly how to feel about that at first, because anytime a game tries to use a trick-taking mechanism, it just ends up feeling like euchre or your traditional trick-taking game with some random theme slapped on top of it. But as I read more and more into this, there's actually quite a few layers that change the way the trick-taking works in this game, and the different suits that players have will allow players to perform different actions. And each of the cards are also multi-use, so they can allow you to choose between different options such as battling, moving, building, or performing research. Just like in traditional trick-taking, the higher card is more valuable, and if you are able to play the highest card for a trick, then that's going to give you the most initiative, and you're going to be able to do your actions first. But you may not always want to take that route because the lowered value cards actually allow you to perform additional actions. So even if you don't have the advantage of turn order, there still is a benefit there. And another neat mechanism that is layered on top of all of that is you can actually discard cards in order to boost your initiative value, but that will come at a cost because you won't have those cards later, which means you're essentially throwing away an action. The battles in this game do use a combination of dice and cards, and the attacking player is going to be rolling those dice, and they essentially have three types of outcomes. They can do risky full-on assaults, try to steal something, or try to dislodge the enemy to gain a positional advantage. But you're not going to have complete control over which of those you choose because this is done through dice rolling, but you will have control over which type of dice you put into your dice pool, and each die will have different probabilities of each of those outcomes, so you'll be able to tailor your dice to the types of probabilities that you want for each of those actions. And the research action is the core of what allows players to create their asymmetrical factions, because you're going to have a few different sections on your board, each representing a different type of ship and a different type of special unit. Researching tech cards will allow you to upgrade those different areas of your board by putting that research card in the space of whatever was there previously. And this allows players to upgrade their ships for combat, their extractors for gaining resources, or their factories for converting those resources into other more useful resources. And of course, those three special units, which can all do something a little bit different. I'm really excited about this one, and if I haven't gushed enough, there is just one more thing I wanted to mention that just makes me feel really good about this campaign, because with a lot of other campaigns on Kickstarter and GameFound, the offerings that we often see on the campaign pages are just so giant and ridiculously huge, with hours and hours of gameplay and tons of miniatures and components, and they're really designed to just sell you more rather than selling you the right amount for the best experience of the game. And for this one, I really feel like it's about the game and trying to create an experience that players can actually get to the table easily, to offer the optimal experience with the smallest package possible. And that's a direction I'd like to see more campaigns go on Kickstarter and GameFound, because these campaigns aren't supposed to be just about how much we can buy and how much plastic and shelf space we can take up. It'd be really nice to see more humble campaigns. They're just offering a sensible package that makes sense and isn't offering too much more than what we really need. Of course, the option for deluxified components is still really nice, but most campaigns just tend to overdo it, and that's something I'd like to see dialed back a little bit more, especially with the crazy shipping prices and the amount of plastic that it creates for the world, which I think we all agree we have enough of already. Of course, we won't know the exact specifics of this campaign until it launches, but if you are interested in this one like I am, definitely follow along and subscribe to get notified.